The sound of keys jingling outside the front door pulled Vanessa Walsh from her half-sleep. She glanced at the digital clock on her nightstand. 2:13 a.m. Her husband Dean was finally home. Vanessa lay perfectly still, her body tense beneath the covers. For months, she had pretended to be asleep when Dean returned from his late meetings or drinks with clients. Tonight was different. Tonight, she knew. She heard the front door open with exaggerated slowness, the careful movements of someone trying not to make noise. Footsteps in the entryway paused. Then Dean's voice, barely above a whisper, "She won't notice." "She never does." A woman's hushed laugh followed. "You shouldn't have brought me here." Vanessa's heart stopped. After 15 years of marriage, Dean hadn't just been cheating. He'd brought the woman into their home. She slipped out of bed, bare feet silent against the hardwood floor. 12 years in ballet had taught her to move without a sound. In the darkness of their bedroom, she grabbed her silk robe and tied it around her waist. In the hallway, Vanessa could see them in the dim light of the entryway. Dean pressing a blonde woman against the wall, his mouth on her neck, her head thrown back in pleasure. The blonde's purse and Dean's briefcase lay forgotten on the floor. "Let me give you the tour," Dean murmured, his hands sliding down to the woman's hips. Starting with the guest room. "My wife's a heavy sleeper," the blonde giggled, drunk on champagne and desire. "What if she wakes up?" "She won't." Vanessa stepped into the light of the entryway. "But I already am awake," Dean jerked back as if burned. The blonde's eyes widened in horror. "Vanessa," Dean began, his face draining of color. "Well," Vanessa said, her voice eerily calm. "Don't let me interrupt the tour." 6 months earlier, Vanessa had been planning their 15th anniversary. She remembered standing in their walk-in closet, holding the midnight blue dress she'd bought for the occasion, a splurge from Nordstrom that had cost more than she usually allowed herself to spend. "What do you think?" she had asked Dean, holding it against her body. "Too much?" Dean had glanced up from his phone, his eyes not really focusing on the dress. "Looks great, babe." That was the moment. Looking back, Vanessa could pinpoint it exactly, when she should have known something had shifted. Dean, the man who had once written her love poems and planned elaborate date nights, couldn't be bothered to look up from his email long enough to notice her. They had met 16 years earlier at a charity fundraiser in Chicago. Vanessa was there representing her family's foundation. Dean was an ambitious financial analyst whose firm had sponsored the event. He'd approached her by the champagne table, confident but not cocky, with warm hazel eyes that crinkled when he smiled. "I've been trying to come up with a clever opening line for the last 20 minutes, he'd admitted. "But all I can think to say is that you're the most beautiful woman in this room. And I'd regret not introducing myself." She'd fallen for him instantly. His intelligence, his drive, the way he looked at her as if she were the only person in the room. They married a year later at her parents' lake house, and Dean joined her family's investment firm soon after. Their life together had been a good one. Not perfect, whose was? But solid, or so she'd thought. The changes were subtle at first. Dean working later. Business trips that stretched from 2 days to 4. The perpetual distraction when he was home, his attention always elsewhere. Vanessa had told herself it was just work stress. The economy was unstable, and Dean's position as CFO of her father's company carried significant pressure. She was determined not to become the stereotypical needy wife, so she'd given him space. Pursued her own interests, started teaching ballet part-time at the community center, made dinner reservations with friends rather than eating alone. The distance between them grew by increments so small they were almost imperceptible. Until suddenly, they were living parallel lives under one roof. Vanessa had tried to talk to him about it 2 months ago. "I feel like we're drifting," she'd said one Sunday morning over coffee. When he actually had time for breakfast, Dean had looked up from the financial section of the Tribune. "What do you mean? When was the last time we had a real conversation? Or made love? Or did anything together that wasn't a work function?" He'd reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I know I've been distracted. This merger is killing me. Once it's done, things will go back to normal. I promise." Vanessa had wanted to believe him. But then came the late-night texts he shielded from her view. The mysterious credit card charges. The faint scent of perfume, not hers, on his shirts. A month ago, she'd found a single blonde hair on his suit jacket. The next day, she hired a private investigator. Now, standing in the entryway of their Lakeview penthouse at 2:15 a.m., facing her husband and his mistress, Vanessa understood that she hadn't really believed the evidence until this moment. She'd been clinging to the possibility of an explanation, any explanation, that didn't shatter the foundation of her life. But there was no misinterpreting this. Jesus Christ. Vanessa, Dean said, stepping away from the blonde. I can explain. The blonde woman smoothed her tight black dress, clearly mortified. She was younger than Vanessa, mid-20s probably, with artfully tousled hair and expertly applied makeup that even at this hour remained flawless. You must be Elise, Vanessa said. The blonde froze. How do you know your name? Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. I know quite a bit about you, Elise Donovan. 27 years old, junior financial analyst at Meridian Partners, graduate of Northwestern. You've been sleeping with my husband for 4 months and 3 days. Dean's face contorted with anger and fear. You had me followed? Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Vanessa asked, her voice still unnervingly steady. The lipstick on your collar wasn't even trying to be subtle. It was practically a cry for help. I think I should go, Elise mumbled, reaching for her purse. Actually, Vanessa said, I'd prefer if you stayed. Since Dean brought you all the way here, it would be rude of me not to offer you a drink. She gestured toward the living room. Please, both of you, sit. Dean and Elise exchanged a look of confusion. Vanessa. It's the middle of the night, Dean began. I'm aware of the time. Dean, I've been aware of the time every night for the past 3 months when you crawl into bed smelling like someone else's perfume. Something in her tone made them both move toward the living room. Vanessa followed, turning on lights as she went. Under the bright, recessed lighting, the scene felt surreal. Her husband and his mistress perched awkwardly on the edge of the sofa she'd spent weeks selecting when they moved in, while she stood before them in her silk robe like a judge presiding over a trial. Scotch, Dean? Vanessa asked, moving to the bar cart. And Elise, you strike me as a vodka soda kind of girl. I don't want a drink, Elise said, her voice small. Trust me, Vanessa replied, pouring amber liquid into a crystal tumbler. You're going to want one. She handed the scotch to Dean, who took it automatically. His hands were shaking. Vanessa, this isn't like you, he said. Can we talk privately? Oh, I think we're beyond privacy, don't you? Vanessa sat in the armchair opposite them. Besides, Elise deserves to be part of this conversation. She's invested quite a bit of time in you, in us, really. I didn't know he was going to bring me here, Elise blurted out. He said his wife was out of town. I never would have. Save it, Vanessa cut her off. I'm not interested in your apologies. Then what do you want? Dean demanded, a flash of his usual arrogance returning. Vanessa leaned forward. I want to know if you've told her about the money. Dean went very still. What? The money. Dean, the $8 million you've been systematically transferring from my family's foundation into offshore accounts over the past year. The color drained from Dean's face. Elise turned to him, confusion written across her features. What is she talking about? She's trying to distract from the real issue, Dean said quickly. This is about us, not business. Actually, Vanessa continued, it's very much about business. You see, Elise, while you've been falling for my husband's charm, he's been embezzling from my family's charitable foundation to fund his exit strategy. That's a lie, Dean snapped. Is it? Vanessa reached for the side table drawer and pulled out a manila folder. These are copies of transfer records. Dean, transfers you authorized using the passwords you stole from my father's computer when he was dying of cancer and too weak to notice. She slid the folder across the coffee table. Dean made no move to touch it. My father trusted you, Vanessa continued. He treated you like a son. And you started stealing from him while he was on his deathbed. Elise was staring at Dean now, her expression shifting from confusion to disgust. "Is this true?" "Of course not," Dean said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Check his briefcase," Vanessa told Elise. "There's a blue thumb drive. Third pocket from the left." Elise hesitated, then reached for Dean's briefcase on the floor. "Don't," Dean warned, grabbing her arm. Elise pulled away from him. "Let go of me." She opened the briefcase and found the thumb drive exactly where Vanessa had said it would be. "That drive contains account numbers for banks in the Cayman Islands and Liechtenstein," Vanessa explained, "along with a rental agreement for a villa in Belize. 1 bedroom, I noticed. Were you planning to take Elise with you, Dean? Or was she just a distraction while you prepared your escape?" Elise stood up, her face a mask of fury. "You son of a bitch!" "Elise, she's manipulating you," Dean said, rising to his feet. "Don't listen to her." "The reservations," Elise said suddenly. "For this weekend? You said we were going to Miami, but you wouldn't show me the confirmation." "Because it was supposed to be a surprise," Dean insisted. "The flight to Belize leaves tomorrow at 6:45 p.m., Vanessa said quietly. 1 passenger. First class." Dean lunged for his briefcase, but Elise was quicker, grabbing it and backing away from him. "Give me the briefcase, Elise," he demanded. "No." Elise clutched it to her chest. "I want to see what else is in here. It's private property. Like the money you stole?" Elise shot back. As they argued, Vanessa pulled out her phone and sent a text. Moments later, the doorbell rang. "That will be Detective Harmon," she said, rising from her chair. "And my attorney, Richard Moss." Dean's face contorted with rage. "You called the police? Are you insane?" "No, Dean, I'm just finally seeing clearly." Vanessa moved toward the door. "Unlike you, I've been planning this moment very carefully." The next hour passed in a blur of formal statements and evidence collection. Detective Harmon, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, took Dean into custody while Richard Moss, Vanessa's silver-haired attorney, explained the process that would follow. "The evidence is overwhelming." "Mr. Walsh," Moss said, his voice professionally detached, "we have documentation of 47 unauthorized transfers, forged signatures on foundation documents, and records of the offshore accounts in your name only." "This is ridiculous," Dean insisted, though his confidence was clearly shaken. "It's a misunderstanding. Those transfers were authorized by the board." "We spoke with every board member yesterday," Vanessa said. "None of them authorized anything." Elise had been questioned separately and was now sitting stunned in the kitchen with a female officer. She had handed over Dean's briefcase willingly, cooperating fully once she realized she might be implicated if she didn't. As Detective Harmon prepared to take Dean to the station, Vanessa asked for a moment alone with her husband. The detective agreed but stayed within eyesight by the door. "Why, Dean?" Vanessa asked, her composure finally beginning to crack. "We had everything. Was it just not enough?" Dean looked at her with a mix of anger and something that might have been regret. "You wouldn't understand. You've never had to fight for anything. Everything was handed to you. The money, the connections, the perfect life." "And I handed all of it to you," Vanessa replied. "I brought you into my family, my world. I trusted you completely. Your father never respected me. To him, I was always just the guy who married his daughter. The outsider. That's not true. He made you CFO because you asked him to, not because he thought I deserved it." Dean's voice broke. "Do you have any idea what it's like to know you're only in the room because of who you married? So this was about your ego? Stealing from charity, cheating with a girl barely out of college, that was supposed to prove something?" "It wasn't about proving anything. It was about finally taking control of my own life." Vanessa shook her head, a tear finally escaping despite her efforts to contain it. "No, Dean, it was about betrayal. Pure and simple. And what would you call this?" He gestured around at the officers, the evidence bags. "Setting me up? Having me followed? You could have confronted me privately. The way you privately brought another woman into our home?" Vanessa wiped away her tear. "The way you privately stole from my dying father?" Detective Harmon stepped forward. "It's time, Mr. Walsh." As they led Dean toward the door, he turned back. "This isn't over, Vanessa." "Actually, it is," she replied. "Completely over." After the police left with Dean, Richard Moss guided Vanessa through what would happen next. The formal charges, the inevitable media attention, the divorce proceedings that would follow. "We'll need to issue a statement," Moss said. "The Foundation's reputation can wait until tomorrow," Vanessa interrupted. "I just need a minute." The attorney nodded sympathetically. "Of course. I'll call you in the morning." When everyone had finally gone, including a shaken Elise who had mumbled something that might have been an apology on her way out, Vanessa found herself alone in the penthouse that no longer felt like home. She moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching familiar objects that now seemed to belong to someone else's life. In the bedroom, she opened Dean's closet and stared at his precisely arranged suits, his collection of designer ties, the polished shoes lined up in perfect rows, all the trappings of the man she thought she knew. Vanessa sat on the edge of the bed, their bed, and finally allowed the tears to come. Not for the man Dean had turned out to be, but for the man she had believed him to be. For the 15 years they'd shared. For the children they'd never had, because Dean always said next year when she brought up starting a family. She cried until there were no tears left, until the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky outside their floor-to-ceiling windows. Then, she got up, washed her face, and began to pack. 3 months later, Vanessa stood on the deck of her family's lake house, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. The early September air held the first hints of autumn, crisp and clean against her skin. The house had been closed up for years. Her parents had preferred their city penthouse after her father's first cancer diagnosis. But this place, with its weathered wood and wraparound porch, had always been Vanessa's true home. The place where she felt most herself. "Tea's ready," called a voice from inside. Vanessa turned to see Meredith, her older sister, emerging with 2 steaming mugs. In the months since Dean's arrest, Meredith had been her rock, handling the press, running interference with their mother's endless questions, stepping in to temporarily manage the foundation while Vanessa took time to heal. "Thanks," Vanessa said, accepting the mug. Meredith leaned against the railing beside her. "How are you doing, really?" Vanessa considered the question. "Better than yesterday. Not as good as tomorrow, probably." "That's progress." Meredith sipped her tea. The final audit report came in. "They've tracked down most of the money. With the plea deal, we should recover about 70%. "Good," Vanessa said. "The scholarship program was my father's favorite project. I couldn't bear to tell those kids they wouldn't be getting funding this year." Dean had agreed to a plea deal, 10 years instead of 20, with the possibility of parole after 7 if he cooperated in recovering all the stolen funds. The scandal had made national news for a week, then faded into the background as newer, more salacious stories took its place. Elise had reached out once, asking to meet. Vanessa had declined. There was nothing the younger woman could say that would change anything, and Vanessa had no interest in playing the role of wounded wife seeking closure or explanation. Some betrayals were simply unforgivable. "Mom wants you to come for dinner this weekend," Meredith said. "She's worried about you being out here alone," Vanessa smiled. "Tell her I'm fine. I'm not alone. I'm in good company." She gestured to the lake, the trees, the sky streaked with color. "Besides, I'm making progress on the studio." She had been converting the lake house's old boathouse into a ballet studio, a place where she could eventually teach children from the nearby towns. The physical labor had been therapeutic, giving her muscles something to do with the restless energy of anger and grief. "The divorce papers are ready to sign," Meredith said after a moment of silence. "Richard says Dean's attorney isn't contesting anything." "He's not in a position to contest," Vanessa replied. "But I'll come into the city next week to sign." They watched the sun sink lower, the light fading from the sky. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't hired that investigator?" Meredith asked. "If you hadn't found out about the money or Elise?" Vanessa considered the question. "Sometimes, I imagine a life of elegant denial, looking the other way, pretending not to notice the signs. A lot of women do it. But not you. No, not me. Vanessa set her mug on the railing. There was a moment, when I thought about confronting him privately. Giving him a chance to explain, to make amends. Why didn't you? Because he brought her into our home, Vanessa said simply. That wasn't just betrayal. It was contempt. He stopped seeing me as someone worthy of even basic respect. The memory of that night still had the power to wound her. Standing in the dark hallway, listening to her husband whisper that she wouldn't notice as he prepared to take another woman into their guest bedroom. The absolute certainty in his voice, the casual dismissal of 15 years together. You know what the hardest part is? Vanessa continued. Realizing that while I was fighting to save our marriage, he was planning his escape. All those nights I waited up, all those conversations I tried to have, he was already gone. Meredith put an arm around her sister's shoulders. His loss. Yes, Vanessa agreed. His loss. As the last light faded from the sky, Vanessa felt something release inside her, a knot of tension she'd been carrying for months, perhaps years. The future stretched before her, undefined but her own. In the morning, she would drive into the nearest town to meet with a contractor about finishing the studio. Next month, she would interview potential scholarship recipients for the foundation. In the spring, she might plant a garden along the southern edge of the property, where the sun hit most directly. Small steps. A life rebuilt, one decision at a time. Later that night, as Vanessa prepared for bed in the lake house's master bedroom, a room that had never known Dean's presence, her phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Is this Vanessa Walsh? Vanessa hesitated, then replied, Yes, who is this? Unknown. My name is Alexandra Winters. I think we need to talk about Dean. Vanessa stared at the message, her heart suddenly racing. Another woman? Or something else entirely? Unknown, I'm not one of his affairs. I'm his former assistant at Meridian Partners before he joined your family's firm. There are things you should know. Vanessa's finger hovered over the phone. She could delete the message. Block the number. Close the door on Dean and everything connected to him. Or she could open it and find out just how deep the deception went. After a long moment, she typed, I'm listening. Standing by the window, Vanessa watched the moonlight shimmer on the lake's surface. Whatever Alexandra Winters had to tell her, whatever new revelation awaited, she would face it with the same clarity and strength that had carried her through that night 3 months ago. The night she had heard his key in the lock at 2 a.m. and chosen to stop pretending not to notice. The night she had finally heard the truth in Dean's whispered words. She won't notice. And decided to prove him wrong in every possible way. She put down her phone and slipped into bed. Vanessa felt something unexpected, curiosity about what would come next. Not dread, not anxiety, but genuine interest in her own unfolding story. For the first time in longer than she could remember, the future felt not like an obligation to be met, but an adventure to be embraced. And that, perhaps, was the most satisfying revenge of all.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.